Danny here with Question Pro. Happy to be in the new year. I'm so excited for this month's episode. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season. I'm joined by my two co-hosts here, Crystal and Dan. Crystal, please introduce yourself.
Hey guys, Happy New Year. Excited to kick off this new year talking about ethics. I'm Crystal Weiss. I'm the Director of Global Marketing here at Question Pro, and I'm excited it's 2025.
Yay!
Awesome. I'm Dan Fleetwood, the President of Research and Insights here at Question Pro, and I'm just happy to be here with Greenbook's Future List nominee. Finalist, excuse me.
Embarrassing.
Future List finalist. So
I'm a real
celebrity among us.
researcher now, guys.
See, you were fighting it for so long, but it's real. You're here.
Real. It's real. Oh, embarrassing.
We're proud of you.
Thanks.
So for this episode, we are going to be talking about ethics and insight, balancing privacy, trust, and innovation. So we are going to be talking about political polling, skewing some data sometimes that may happen, and also why ethical practices are critical for the future of market research. So the first one that I want to talk about is ethics in action. So that's embedding privacy in research design. One of the things that I wanted to really nail on was defining ethical research practices, what they are and what they matter. So, or why they matter. Anyone want to take initiative?
Because my ethics are gray at best when it comes to survey. As a Future List nominee finalist.
Yeah, I mean, I think ethics can take there's lots of different ways you can go with ethics. I think especially when it comes to guidelines and market research. I mean, from the basic standpoint, like if you say, hey, we need a few moments of your time, like truly take a few moments of the respondent's time. Don't take the 20 minutes. Like, you know, have that sort of consideration, all the way down to, you know, the responses, like as you mentioned, in terms of, hey, on the back end, are you doing anything to skew the data in a way that you want to see the data outcome? But I've heard stories where people not following good guidelines and that don't have the good ethics or moral compass will put people into different quotas just because they need those quotas to be filled up, right, for a particular project. So those sorts of things happen. So I think it's important to be ethical to the respondents, but also in the project design, and not even the design, but just as you're going through it, like making sure that you're holding the standard and that's being portrayed to, throughout your project. Excuse me. I think the biggest thing is you don't want to get a reputation for being unethical because then no one will want to work with you, right? So there's that.
But I know there's at least one story I've heard in the time, like one that really stuck out to me, where it was, they were doing like a public voting it wasn't about voting, but it was like a pop culture thing. And the audience that they sampled, they specifically did it at a certain time so they could get a specific audience, even though they said it was for everyone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And specifically asked the sample team to kind of skew it that way. And I think when it comes, though, to ethics, Dan, when it comes to setting yourself up for success or your customers up for success, what about when the customer that is paying you ask you to be a little wonky?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just there's a I wouldn't say a balance. I mean, there's things that can be considered unethical. There's things that can be, depending on how you want to portray it. But I think you still need to kind of hold the standard and not do those kind of things, especially again, because you don't want to get that reputation, right? Of kind of bending the rules. I think one thing in most researchers and one thing that's important is they do have pretty high standards in terms of, clean data sets and wanting to maintain that. But if you do have a client push back on you and say, hey, I need this done, I don't care how, just, kind of close your eyes and hit a button on the keyboard or whatever you need to do. I would question, do I even want to work with that client, honestly?
Yeah.
Because chances are if they're doing that, they're probably cutting corners somewhere else or not paying you what you should be doing. Like it's the,
Yeah,
they want like the world on a, shoestring budget. So
that's fair.
yeah,
Could it be that they're looking for confirmation bias in that case rather than true market research?
for sure. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into, hey, I have, let's say I have my product already done. I need to just confirm and get some numbers to back up why this product should go out or whatever it might be, right? Whatever numbers you need. And there's like, some jokes of like, well, this data doesn't match my numbers, so I'm going to use my number instead of the data, right? So there's like these things that shouldn't happen, right? You really should be doing research to actually find out what you need to find out, and not what you're hoping or what you think you need to validate. So there's definitely a lot there, and I've seen it get a little hairy at times.
This is MRX Unplugged.
You hear stories about it, of unethical and just needing to run the data to match, certain numbers and waiting or, kind of fudging the numbers, skewing the data to meet your desired outcome, which isn't good at all.
So let's get spicier with it, because that's what this, entire webinar is really about. What are the most overlooked ethical considerations in market research today?
Overlooked.
I don't know if overlooked, but
oh, I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. It's not overlooked, but I think not programming your surveys for people with accessibility issues. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's I think there's two ways to think about programming ethics or market research ethics. Is the one where you're intentionally being unethical, and then there's almost the one where you're not even considering it, not out of malice, but not with intent. Omission, right? Ethics by omission is not including people with disabilities, people with accessibility issues. You're actually taking out large portions of the U.S. Or like anywhere that can't answer surveys in a way you have specifically programmed them to do them on a keyboard or on a phone. What if you have disability issues? What if you have mobility issues? What if you have lack of access to internet issues?
Yeah.
And I think that like the lack of accessibility for people who do not fit the mid-tier standard is really ethics of omission almost.
Yeah.
I would say that would probably be the biggest one, I think.
Accessibility.
Yeah, and I think something that I don't know if it's overlooked, but I guess it would be overlooked is taking into account all the privacy and confidentiality considerations when dealing with respondents. I mean, it's easy to collect the data, but then if you're not also safeguarding it on the back end, or somehow could get out, especially in this day and age we live in, you hear about all the times
the data breaches.
Data breaches and these kind of things. So I think it's good to making sure that you have those standards in place of, and even when you're collecting the data, that only collect the data that you need. Like don't collect, personal data if you don't need it, and you can be ethical in that regard. I think another area that might get overlooked is, different age restrictions and things when you're dealing with kids, right? So, and having different age gating and things like that. So platforms like Question Pro have age gating inside of it. So it'll ask the respondent how old they are before they can even enter the survey. So things like that I think are good. And just help out with overall social responsibility and things like that.
I think that definitely helps, especially with the way that a lot of information has been leaked, which is unfortunate. Even I think, I don't know if it's programmable, but like cookies and stuff when it comes to surveys, safeguarding that, which I think kind of leads to our next point, which is building trust through transparency. Trust is a foundation of every great relationship, including the one between researchers and their participants. So transparency is about data. It's just not, it's courtesy. It's not, it's a necessity, I would say. So for the role of transparency in gaining participant trust, how can we improve that? What'd you say, Dan?
Yeah, at the beginning of your survey or whatever study you're doing, have a statement saying, hey, we're going to be using the data in this manner. Typically, like the go-to line is your responses will only be viewed in the aggregate, not individual. So that way it's a collection of responses, not just individual. So the idea is, one, you're being ethical, but also that you are hopefully can get some more real, rich responses, because if they know that, hey, they're not just looking at me, they're going to look at it in the aggregate, then maybe I'll be more honest on some of these surveys. So I think that kind of two-way communication goes pretty well.
That's a really, I
again,
never thought about that, like putting that in the, I don't think I've ever seen that in a survey, that your answers won't be looked at independently. They'll be looked at as an aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting, actually, Dan.
Yeah. I mean,
great job. You're so good job, Dan.
Almost like the camera.
Wow.
I have my moments. So
Dan came in hot today.
So what would be some of the practical uses for aggregate data?
I mean, that's pretty much when you collect all the survey data, you're viewing responses in the aggregate, right? So you don't care, like you had one male, you had 40% males, 60% females. So you're viewing all of that collected data in different groups or subsets. So unless you're doing like a qualitative study where you want the more individual responses, then you wouldn't really be viewing it in the aggregate. You probably wouldn't have that statement, or you wouldn't do it because you want to look at each individual study or IDI or whatever it might be for each person.
Okay. So, I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but how can researchers ensure participants fully understand how their data will be used? We talked about consent of age, and also just, being upfront about it. But is there anything in specific?
Yeah, I've seen where respondents will get either how they answered in comparison to everyone else. So
that's fun.
At the end. So if you wanted to see, there's that transparency there. And then also I've seen, especially on public policy type studies, where they'll say, hey, the report's going to be available on, XYZ website. If you want to go see the data that'll be collected and how we're using it, you can go here to view the end result. So I think having that, mention that you're going to be able to mention to the responder that they're going to be able to see the data and where they can find it, and then share it with them.
Stack up against other people, or how it's used in the long term. That's very cool. Yeah. I definitely feel like a lot of surveys I take just go into the abyss.
I think that's
like what the purpose of the survey is. You never really end up knowing.
I mean, you could see okay, it's because I bought this thing. You can put common sense to it a lot of times.
Yes.
Right.
But you never know the outcome. I just took a HubSpot UX survey, and I just want to be like, you should have done this survey before you change the UX, because now I am. But it's okay, well, now I'm taking this, but I don't know when any of my feedback will be applied. And I always get disqualified because we work in market research.
Well, so you're being ethical by saying that you work in.
I want a formal protest.
Okay, I don't know where you're going to submit this, but
it's starting here.
For market researchers, why do we disqualify market researchers? We take surveys the best.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think it goes back to being ethical considerations. You might know what's coming up in a particular survey that could bias the results. So it's all that's really what it's all about.
I'm just trying to be nice. I take all your dumb surveys.
It's too much of a peek behind the curtain. Would that be good phrasing for that?
I think so. I think more. Yeah, I mean, ever since I've been in the industry, they've always excluded market researchers, and even some go even further. Does anyone in your household work in market research? It's
oh wow.
We take the surveys and are typically good at them, and I complete them all, even if they put me in a loop that makes it longer.
I know.
So I think it's rude.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, how can we communicate, what the data usage is going to be in clear, understandable terms? Because I feel like a lot of the time, especially maybe like in scientific studies, they like use really big jargon, which could kind of maybe
Mhm.
confuse the users. So how can we communicate that better?
Or
Mhm.
Yeah.
secondary question, Dan, have you ever used jargon to intentionally confuse a respondent so that they answer the way you want them to
Street, close your
answer?
eyes.
No, I don't do a lot of political polling, luckily. So,
Well, shots fired.
no, I love political polling. It's interesting to watch, but no, I've never, not intentionally to, kind of throw off the respondent or,
Hmm.
I mean, I think more often than not, you still have to go back to the rule of, write your surveys at like a 5th grade level, so that way they'll
I
understand
think
it, so.
sometimes, and I will even our market research team, our research services guys, they're so smart, right? We have PhD level people on our team. Every once in a while, they think that they're writing it so clear
Mhm.
because they're trying to take in proper English and like, we don't want to confuse them. And I'm like, but you just made it so more like there's not layman's terms, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, but then if I write it too casually, I get like a Dan like stink eye.
It's more so because you don't want to lead them down the path. I mean,
Yeah.
and also you want to make sure that all the answer options are clear.
I'm trying to use regular words.
Data.
Yes, no, maybe. Those are regular words.
Okay, sorry, Danny. I hijacked.
No, you're good. So, what techniques have you seen work best for fostering long-term trust? As to kind of, I guess, bandwagon on that.
Yeah,
I
I think
think
it's-
community.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think communities is a great way to do that. Whether it's a communities platform like Question Pro has, or even just a survey lists community, right? Or your Instagram community, your TikTok community. I think, or your consumers, like if you're at a coffee shop and you have regulars,
Mhm.
you sign up for those dumb rewards on the stupid Square thing where they ask
Yeah.
you like sign up and now like tip more.
Yeah.
And but I think if you're consistently sending them surveys, let's say once a quarter even, like
Mhm.
then you build that trust over time that one, they're asking me cool information. Two, maybe hopefully something you have replied or they submitted, you made a change for.
Mhm.
Yes.
And we're able to kind of follow up with that. But I think either building like using your community and surveying them consistently, not just like
Yeah, that's the biggest
randomly,
thing.
like then you
Commitment.
build that trust and then they can actually see how the surveys they take influence your business decisions.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think the community and everything you mentioned is perfect. One other thing is, typically in market research, you're using some sort of online sample, right? And all these companies have their panelists, their databases. So while to you it's not a long term, not it's not long term. You just want them to complete your survey and move on. Them being in the panel and inside of market research should be long term. So you want to make sure, I think, from a holistic perspective, that you are being ethical with those respondents, because you want them to also participate in surveys as well, right? Future surveys. So the better you can do to make sure they have a good experience on yours, the better it'll be for everyone. So I think that's something to take into account. While it's not a long term, again, on you when you're creating the survey, but holistically for the industry it is.
Speaking of holistically, so innovation and ethics can sometimes be seen as being at odds, but they don't necessarily have to be. So let's explore how prioritizing ethics can fuel creativity and inspire new methodologies in market research. So, how can ethical constraints encourage out of the box thinking to solve complex research challenges?
Mhm.
And maybe how we can kind of bypass that, I guess.
Man, Danny, you come up with good questions.
Thank you. It's my job.
Yeah, and I don't know that, like, I can't think of any examples where an ethical situation led to like some big innovation, but I think it's something that you need to think about inside of your, whatever research you're doing, that you're taking these things into account, and you can come up with creative ways. Like, one of the things, I guess maybe this is an example, is, respondent respondent anonymity assurance is hard to say, and a product that we have here, hard for me to say, I should say. Yeah, but we call it RAA, but it's keeping the respondent anonymous throughout the survey, right? So that's something that we came up with, and it has some bigger challenges than you think, because it's not only masking like all of like who the respondent is from an email list, but it's also masking like their location and everything, so they can't be traced, right? And so I guess it's not like a big, like, kind of sexy product, or not a feature rather, but it's something that is necessary for these, kind of ethical considerations.
You mean like when Danny sends a survey and then someone is like, I don't know, like, is like, I somewhat didn't like this, and she was like trying to track down who it was. Realized it was her.
It was me.
But you didn't have RAA turned on, so you
No,
probably
she didn't. But I think that goes back to some of that is ethics, even moving outside of your survey, making sure you don't remove respondents to skew the data in a way you want the data to go, right? Like, it would be really easy to be like, well, these people don't live in the right zip code to have feedback, so let's take them out.
Yeah.
Like gerrymandering your survey results.
There you go. That's it.
Should not be doing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess another one would be, it can fall into the ethical category, because you want to make sure if your survey does have like content in there that minors shouldn't be viewing, right? Or let's say you're a video game manufacturer and you're coming out with a game, but maybe it's rated 18 plus or whatever, or 14 plus, whatever the age is, and you don't want the kids taking your survey because there could be content in there that they shouldn't see. I guess that is both ethical and also following the guidelines and laws in different countries, but that's something that you come up with innovative solutions so that you can terminate them before they enter the survey. But it's not even termination, it's more than that, because you don't even need to know that who that person was. You just need to make sure they don't get in your survey, right? So that's a kind of interesting kind of angle to it as well. So I guess I couldn't think of examples at first, but there are quite a few examples where these different kind of ethical or
what I'm really surprised about, Dan, is that blockchain never made it into surveys.
Yeah.
Not because it's a useful. I'm not trying to make this like a weird vibe, but like, I know a lot about blockchain just because that's what I did in my job prior to coming to Question Pro for 6 years. And it is about, but it's not as anonymous as people think it is, because you can track those, like you can track hashes pretty easily if you know the origin and where it goes. So you can track transaction hashes on the Bitcoin blockchain, at least, fairly easily. You might not know who it is, but it's like not hard. There's not that many people who own Bitcoin, frankly. These people think
no, I mean, we did think about it. I remember it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Could have made it in, but there was really not at the end of the day, to your point, you don't actually even need to know they needed to be in the survey. So, but it makes me kind of intrigued. I wonder if somebody tried to do that and then realized.
I know we thought about it, 4 or 5 years ago when blockchain was having its heyday or moment. I know we kind of kicked around the idea.
There's lots of ways to do it without it.
Yeah.
Right. You wouldn't need to token it in any way. But it is, if speaking of anonymity, that just is an interesting, I'm surprised it didn't make it in.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think there is true anonymity on the internet. There's always some way, somehow.
Yeah, there's entire industries and a pretty large company called Chain Analysis, whose jobs are to track down Bitcoin users based on their IDs.
Really?
Oh yeah, they've been doing it since I've known in 2015. So they could, it's very easy to find people on the blockchain
Wow. You heard it here first.
It is off topic. We're in a webinar. I'm sorry, guys.
That's
Let's tie it back then. So, what are some practical strategies for ethics and ethical innovation in market research? Just because as we look ahead, some of the most successful researchers will be those that can innovate without compromising on ethics. AI has become quite the hot topic in all of 2024, and now we're entering the new year in 2025. What would you give, or what advice would you give to? I can't talk today either. What advice would you give to researchers looking to innovate ethically?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to
Heavy sigh.
what?
You just went heavy sigh.
Well, I was thinking about how to word it. I think what's interesting, and we're seeing it now with the rise of, like OpenAI and these large LLMs and protecting the data, right? So you need, if you say to your client, this data will not be used in any training modules or anything like that, then make sure that it's really not, because that would be the worst case where you and your client entrusts you to collect this data. They want to do, maybe some sort of AI analysis on it, and then it goes into like the larger data pool, and that's
you gotta make sure nothing's turned off, yo.
Yeah. So I think those things, just making sure that you're working with clients that want to innovate, but they want to do it in an ethical way. I think those are the key considerations, especially when we think about where the industry is going and where the bulk of the new features and innovation will be. It's going to be in the AI and the generative AI space.
I also would say not letting AI take your entire, it's a great tool to start your surveys and build your survey questions, but don't let it lead your survey building. Right. You're the human, you're in charge.
Yeah, use it as a tool to make your life easier.
Right? I feel like you have to have that same talk when you have a dog. You are the owner, not the dog that's trying to make you
But the dog knows how to control you. So
you need to control the AI. Don't let the AI control you.
That's a good one.
Thanks. That'll be our next sticker for X Day.
Don't let AI control you.
You're the human.
Speaking of, there is a culture of ethics that can be built into organizations. So maybe we can touch on that and see if maybe we can have some good sage advice for people that are maybe starting out or have already had a long history of it but would like to pivot. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on
that. Places like the Insights Association. Yeah. The Insights Association works really hard behind the scenes in the states advocating for to Congress for survey respondent rights, making sure that market research guidelines as in the government are followed correctly. SMR, which Dan's a celebrity there, is great at it in the States and in Europe. But there are programs and organizations that are really passionate about ethics in our polling and political polling in our market research data. So make sure you follow them because you'll learn a lot. I get their emails every day and I'm always like, wow, they are doing a lot of lobbying that I don't
they're doing a lot. Yeah. And you can get ethical guidelines and different, even with AI, I know SMR has a 20 questions. I forget exactly how many it is. To ask her,
you have to write it.
I know. Ask her, it's either 20 or 25. I can't remember. But to ask your suppliers when you're thinking about AI or implementing it, considerations, and they have a lot of guidelines around this. So ethical and standards, I think, are key ways of both Insights Association, SMR. To your point, Crystal, they can really help out and help guide you to make sure you're following. And if you can implement these things, there's different badges and things you can put where people know, okay, these guys are serious about their data and collecting it. So it just helps kind of maintain that standard as well.
That's so fun. I didn't know about the badges.
Yeah.
Also, guys, my chair is sinking.
Oh no.
The hydraulics in my chair broke, so I slowly slink now. I think that is important, to Dan's point about asking your vendors about their uses of AI in there when you're signing up for them. That's definitely our next
In
wave.
contracts. Yeah. Well, I definitely learned quite a bit, especially, as I've been getting into this industry. I've been learning so much more, and it's so nice to be able to still learn quite a bit, even though it's a topic that we've talked about for like the past year now.
Okay, I just learned something from Dan too today.
Nice.
Nice.
That's what we're all about. So yes, ethical practices aren't just a challenge, they're an opportunity to build trust, drive innovation, and lead the industry into the future. But yeah, as we head into the new year, let's commit to making a more transparent and respectful and effective market research ecosystem. Wow,
Yeah.
my brain is just going out the window.
That new
Yes.
year,
The new year. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys so much for being on this webinar. And for anyone watching towards the end here, I appreciate you extra. And I will see everyone in the next one.